Over 2,000 years ago, ancient China created something extraordinary: an army made of clay, meant to protect an emperor for eternity. Discovered by chance in 1974, the Terracotta Army astonished the world with its size, detail, and sheer mystery. Despite intense study, many questions remain. How were they made? What do they reveal about the beliefs of ancient China? And why do some experts believe there is much more hidden beneath the Earth's surface? Today, we'll explore the science, history, and enigmas behind one of archaeology's greatest puzzles. Beneath the soil, the silent army. The discovery of the Terracotta Army began in 1974, when farmers in Xi'an dug a well during a drought and struck something unusual: a life-sized clay head. Local authorities called in archaeologists, led by Zhao Kongman, who soon uncovered entire pits filled with rows of soldiers. These weren't simple statues. Each warrior was unique, with detailed armor, hairstyles, and faces. Some stood tall as generals, others crouched as archers, while horses and chariots stood ready in battle formation. Even officials and entertainers appeared among them, showing this was more than an army, it was a miniature empire. By the 2000s, over 8,000 soldiers, 670 horses, and 130 chariots had been excavated, with many more still buried. Radar scans revealed the necropolis stretched nearly 100 square kilometers, a vast underground city mirroring the emperor's court. Yet the central tomb remains sealed. Soil tests show high mercury levels, supporting ancient accounts of rivers of liquid mercury inside. Fears of toxic gases, fragile relics, and possible traps keep it untouched. What began as a search for water revealed one of history's greatest treasures: a clay army built to guard Qin Shi Huang's dream of ruling, not just in life, but for eternity. A ruler obsessed with eternity. To understand why the Terracotta Army was built, we must first understand the man behind it. Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of a unified China. Born in 259 BCE, he rose to power as a teenager. At just 13 years old, he inherited the throne of the Qin kingdom. Over the next 30 years, through relentless military campaigns, he defeated rival states and unified China for the first time in its history. His achievements reshaped the nation. He standardized the written script, enabling communication across vast regions. He introduced a single currency and enforced uniform weights and measures. He built roads and canals to connect his empire and began the massive construction project that would become the Great Wall of China. His legacy as a unifier is undeniable, but beneath the triumphs was a man haunted by mortality. Qin Shi Huang was obsessed with conquering death itself. Ancient texts describe his desperate search for immortality. He dispatched expeditions across the seas in search of mythical islands said to hold the secret of eternal life. He relied on alchemists who promised magical elixirs. He consumed strange potions, many laced with mercury, believing they would preserve his youth. The irony is cruel. Historians believe he died in 210 BCE, likely from mercury poisoning, at only 49 years old. His attempt to escape death may have hastened it. Yet, for Qin, death was not the end. In ancient Chinese belief, the afterlife was a continuation of existence. Power, rank, and authority mattered just as much beyond the grave. Qin intended to continue ruling after death, and the Terracotta Army was his protection. Thousands of clay soldiers were positioned around his tomb to guard him for eternity. Their placement was strategic. They faced east, toward the territories of his former enemies, as if prepared to fight them again in the afterlife. The construction of his mausoleum began early in his reign and continued for nearly 4 decades. Ancient records claim more than 700,000 workers were involved. Whether or not that number is exact, the project required immense manpower, resources, and coordination. Modern scans revealed that the mausoleum complex was not just a tomb, but a vast underground empire. Archaeologists believe it contains storage rooms, stables, offices, gardens, and entertainment halls. The central chamber, still sealed, is said to include treasures of gold and jade, with a ceiling painted like the night sky and a floor flowing with rivers of mercury. Mechanically rigged crossbows may have been installed to defend against intruders. While much of this is still hidden, evidence supports at least some of these claims. High levels of mercury in the soil suggest the ancient accounts were accurate. As Professor Lucas Nickel observed, Qin Shi Huang's mausoleum is not simply a tomb, it is a statement of imperial power, technological genius, and religious belief. The Terracotta Army reflects a worldview where death itself is a battlefield, and the emperor continues to reign. In other words, Qin Shi Huang did not prepare for death in the ordinary sense, he sought to control it. His mausoleum and army were his way of ensuring his authority extended beyond life. But his legacy is not simple. He unified China and laid the foundations for one of the world's great civilizations. Yet he also ruled with brutality, burning books, silencing scholars, and enforcing absolute obedience. His reign was marked by both genius and tyranny. The Terracotta Army reflects this paradox. It is both a work of art and a monument to fear. It shows Qin's brilliance in organization and vision, and his deep anxiety about mortality. When we look at those clay faces today, we do not just see soldiers, we see the ambition of a man who refused to accept human limits, a man who dreamed of ruling forever. His warriors still stand guard, silent and unyielding, as if waiting for their emperor to rise again. The craftsmanship behind it, the Terracotta Army, is astonishing, not just for its size, but for the craftsmanship behind it. Imagine the challenge. More than 8,000 life-size warriors, each one different, complete with horses, officers, and chariots created over 2,200 years ago, without modern machines or factories. Archaeologists have studied the process, and what they've discovered reveals a mix of ingenuity and discipline. The foundation of this army was clay, drawn from the rich yellow earth around Xi'an, but the soldiers were not sculpted as single pieces. That would have been impossible on such a massive scale. Instead, the artisans used a method that feels surprisingly modern: an assembly line system. Heads, torsos, arms, and legs were molded separately, then joined together using clay slip, a type of natural adhesive. The figures were hollowed to reduce their weight and then fired in kilns, much like giant pottery. Once assembled, the statues were heavy, between 150 and 200 kilograms each, and had to be carefully handled. What makes them extraordinary is their individuality. Studies show that only about 10 basic molds were used for the faces, but no two warriors look exactly alike. After the main forms were assembled, artisans applied fresh clay and hand-sculpted the final details: wrinkles, cheekbones, mustaches, hairstyles, even subtle expressions of pride or determination. This final touch gave every figure a unique identity, as if modeled on real soldiers of Qin's army. Professor Wu Hung of the University of Chicago described it perfectly. The Terracotta Army combines efficiency with artistry. Mass production created the forms, but individual hands gave them life. The level of detail extended to armor and clothing. Soldiers' torsos were layered with sculpted breastplates, belts, and ties. Even tiny rivets were pressed into the clay. Legs were made with coiling techniques similar to those used in pipe making at the time. Each statue reflected not just a soldier, but a military rank, crafted with precision. Archaeologists have also found inscriptions and workshop stamps on some tiles and statues. This suggests a system of accountability. Workshops may have marked their output so officials could trace any mistakes back to the makers. This was not simply art, it was a vast imperial project, organized with military discipline. And it wasn't only soldiers. Excavations revealed entertainers, dancers, strongmen, and administrators among the clay figures. Qin Shi Huang was not preparing only for war, he was recreating his empire underground. His afterlife was meant to mirror his court in life, complete with protection, governance, and entertainment. But such grandeur came at a cost. The mausoleum required tens of thousands of workers, artisans, craftsmen, and conscripted peasants. A mass grave near the site suggests that many workers did not live to see their families again. Some legends even claim that craftsmen were sealed inside the tomb to ensure its secrets would never be revealed. Despite years of study, mysteries remain. Where were the main workshops located? How were the massive statues transported and positioned with such precision? How did officials coordinate the supply of clay, fuel for kilns, and tools across nearly 4 decades of construction? Each discovery answers questions, but new puzzles remain. The Terracotta Army is more than a monument to an emperor, it is also a tribute to the unseen hands of the thousands of craftsmen who created it. Their skills preserved in clay, long after their names were forgotten. The mystery of weapons of eternity. As impressive as the clay warriors are, they were not unarmed. Many carried real weapons: bronze swords, spears, halberds, and crossbows, making the discovery even more extraordinary. Archaeologists have recovered over 40,000 weapons from the pits. What astonished researchers most was their condition. After being buried for over 2 millennia, many blades were still sharp, their edges gleaming as if made only decades ago. Normally, ancient bronze corrodes quickly when exposed to soil and moisture. So why were these weapons preserved so well? For years, scholars believed that Qin had developed an advanced anti-rust technology, possibly coating the blades with chromium. This theory gained popularity because chromium traces were detected on some artifacts, and chromium plating was thought to be a modern invention. But recent studies from University College London challenged this idea. Researchers tested hundreds of weapons and concluded that the chromium traces came from contamination in the lacquer used to protect the clay figures, not deliberate plating. The real explanation, they argue, lies in 3 factors. Bronze quality: Qin weapons had unusually high tin content, making them stronger. Heat treatment: evidence suggests blacksmiths used quenching heating and rapidly cooling blades to harden their edges. Soil chemistry: the alkaline soil of Xi'an helped protect bronze by slowing corrosion naturally. This combination preserved the arsenal for over 2,000 years. The sophistication of the weaponry is undeniable. The crossbows in particular reveal advanced engineering. Their bronze trigger mechanisms were crafted with remarkable precision, enabling them to fire with power and accuracy. Tests suggest these crossbows could pierce armor at long range. Historian Mike Lodes remarked, "The Terracotta Army's crossbows were centuries ahead of their time, lethal, accurate, and organized for battle." Bundles of arrowheads, each group containing about 100 pieces, were also discovered. They appear as if packed into quivers, demonstrating not only realism, but also military organization. The Terracotta Army was sculpted as if it were ready to march into combat. This raises important questions. Were the weapons ceremonial, made solely for the afterlife? Or were they actual surplus weapons from Qin's military stockpiles? Some scholars lean toward the latter, given their practicality and condition. If so, it would mean the emperor diverted real arms from his army to supply his eternal guards. Whatever the case, the presence of real weapons reflects Qin Shi Huang's obsession with security. His soldiers were not only life-sized imitations, they were armed and dangerous, designed to defend him for eternity. At the same time, the arsenal demonstrates the technological power of the Qin dynasty. At a time when many civilizations struggled with simple bronze casting, Qin's craftsmen produced weapons that rivaled later eras in sophistication. And yet, like the warriors themselves, the weapons raised new mysteries. How did the Qin mass-produce so many weapons with such consistent quality? Did they use techniques now lost to history? And are there more weapons still buried in unopened pits, waiting to be uncovered? The clay soldiers may symbolize the emperor's will, but the bronze weapons remind us that his empire was built on military strength. Together, they form a chilling statement. Qin Shi Huang intended to rule, not only in life, but in death, and he prepared for war on both fronts. Secrets of the Forbidden Tomb. While the Terracotta Army astonishes millions, the greatest mystery of all still lies sealed: the tomb of Qin Shi Huang himself. At the foot of Mount Li rises a massive earthen mound, untouched for over 2,000 years. Inside it, legends claim, lies one of the most extraordinary burial chambers ever built. Ancient historian Sima Qian, writing around 100 years after Qin's death, described the tomb as a palace beneath the earth. The ceiling was painted to represent the heavens, while the floor held flowing rivers of mercury arranged to mirror China's great waterways. He even warned of traps, mechanical crossbows designed to fire on anyone daring to enter. For centuries, scholars debated whether these stories were exaggerations, but modern science has supported some of them. Soil samples near the mound show extraordinarily high levels of mercury, far beyond natural levels. This discovery suggests that the rivers of mercury may indeed exist, engineered as a deadly deterrent against tomb robbers. Mercury, however, is not the only concern. Archaeologists fear that opening the chamber could expose fragile artifacts to rapid decay. When the first warriors were uncovered in the 1970s, their painted surfaces flaked away within hours after exposure to air. What might happen to delicate treasures sealed underground for 2 millennia? The risk of losing them forever is too high. Then there are the tales of traps. While no one has dared to test them, the idea seems plausible. Qin Shi Huang was obsessed with protection. Why wouldn't he commission hidden defenses for his final resting place? Some legends go even further, claiming that workers who built the tomb were locked inside after completion to ensure its secrets would never escape. Archaeological evidence of mass graves near the site hints that this might not be entirely myth. Modern archaeologists, therefore, proceed with extreme caution, as Dr. Albert Lin of National Geographic has noted. Qin Shi Huang's tomb could transform our understanding of ancient China. But to rush in now would risk irreparable damage. The price of curiosity could be the loss of history itself. Instead, researchers rely on technology like ground-penetrating radar and 3D imaging. These non-invasive scans reveal a vast network of chambers stretching around the central mound, confirming that the mausoleum is far more complex than previously imagined. But the central chamber, the emperor's final resting place, remains sealed, its secrets locked away by time, science, and caution. The Terracotta Army is more than clay figures. It is a lens into Qin Shi Huang's worldview and the beliefs of ancient China. But preserving this treasure has proven as challenging as uncovering it. The struggle to preserve the warriors. When the warriors were first unearthed, archaeologists were stunned by their vibrant colors. Reds, blues, and purples painted the clay, bringing the army to life. But almost immediately, disaster struck. Once exposed to air, the pigments curled and flaked away, leaving behind the dull gray statues we see today. Since then, conservation has been a race against time. The museum in Xi'an operates sophisticated climate control systems to regulate temperature and humidity. International teams from the British Museum to the Getty Conservation Institute work with Chinese experts to stabilize pigments, strengthen clay, and slow deterioration. Yet challenges persist. Millions of visitors walk through the pits each year, and even their breath, heat, and footsteps subtly affect the fragile environment. In 2023, the site made headlines when a reckless visitor damaged two warriors, reminding the world how vulnerable these figures remain. Preserving the Terracotta Army is not just about clay. It is about safeguarding one of humanity's greatest cultural legacies. UNESCO designated it a World Heritage Site in 1987, but its long-term survival depends on technology, research, and careful global cooperation. The cultural and spiritual meaning. Beyond the science lies meaning. For Qin Shi Huang, death was not the end, it was a continuation of rule. The Terracotta Army embodied his belief that hierarchy and authority extended into the afterlife. The soldiers were guardians, positioned to defend him for eternity. Their eastern-facing formation symbolically pointed toward the direction of his former enemies, ready for eternal battle. But the army was not alone. Archaeologists have also uncovered acrobats, musicians, and officials among the pits, showing that Qin intended to replicate his entire court underground. Dr. Tang Jigang, a Chinese archaeologist, summarizes, "The Terracotta Army is more than art. It is a microcosm of Qin society discipline, hierarchy, and service carried into the afterlife." Through these figures, we glimpse the values of the Qin dynasty: loyalty, order, and fear of chaos. The army was not simply decoration, it was a continuation of life, power, and control, sculpted in clay. Theories and legends, of course. Mysteries invite speculation. Some conspiracy theories claim the army was a modern forgery created during China's Cultural Revolution, a claim firmly disproven by scientific dating of the clay and pigments, which confirm their ancient origin. Others suggest foreign influence, arguing that the lifelike realism of the figures might have been inspired by Greek art after Alexander the Great's campaigns. But most scholars caution against this, noting that the Qin dynasty had its own advanced artistic traditions. More mystical theories persist: whispers of curses, traps, or even extraterrestrial involvement. While unsupported, these legends reflect the awe the Terracotta Army continues to inspire. The silence of the clay soldiers fuels imagination as much as it fuels science. Eternity in clay. The Terracotta Army is more than an archaeological wonder. It is a story about power, fear, ambition, and the human desire to outlive death. Qin Shi Huang dreamed of immortality. He failed to achieve it in body, but his obsession gave birth to one of the world's greatest wonders. His clay soldiers still stand guard, silent and unyielding, protecting his tomb, his dream, and his secrets. For nearly 50 years, they have fascinated archaeologists and visitors from across the globe. And for 2,000 years before that, they lay hidden, waiting to tell their story. So we arrive at the final question. What lies within the sealed chamber of the first emperor? Is it gold, jade, and priceless treasures? Is it deadly traps and rivers of mercury? Or is it something that could rewrite history itself? Share your theories in the comments. And if this journey into one of history's greatest mysteries has fascinated you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories from the shadows of the past.